Yeah, so I was asked to share something about beekeeping associations. First of all, we're talking about a trade association here. A trade association is supposed to represent an industry, not a part of it, not like a co-op would. So I thought, well, what would be most valuable to share today? And I think it's the things that we've done here in Fiji maybe that would be applicable to the other Pacific islands. And not everything, everybody's country's different, everybody's situation is different, but there's gonna be some things here I think that we can, that may be applicable. So I wanna share that. So I'm going to take you on our journey first, a little bit of our journey, and then focus a little bit on some of our projects that have worked well. And it's going to appear like things are somewhat organized here, maybe to the outsiders, but it's really a lot of. We're a very informal group, as you'll see. All right, I first came to Fiji in 1985, and almost all the honey on the shelf was imported. It said Australia on it, but based on the price, I think most of it was coming from China. And then there was some development projects starting in the 1970s, right up through the 2000s, that put a lot of beehives into a lot of villages in Fiji. Typically 20 beehives communally owned in these villages into literally hundreds of villages. Most of these, more than 90%, the projects failed. So when I moved here to Fiji permanently in 2008, there were a lot of failing beekeepers. We had a beekeeping association, but it was, not able, didn't have the capacity to really do much. We can't. I say we had inadequate extension services, and it's not a criticism of Ministry of Agriculture, but in a small country, we can't expect government to have an expert in every sector of agriculture. It's unrealistic. We have to look at who in our countries, who in our islands have the most expertise and get the most out of it to share to the others. And that's what our organization has really tried to focus on. And we've put a lot of effort into focusing towards the beekeepers. And on the other side of it, typically an organization, you've got, officers, you've got treasurers, and you do. I'll tell you, I'll be quite upfront, right? We don't have a membership list. You want to know how many members Fiji Beekeepers has? We can't tell you. We don't charge dues, annual subscriptions, or anything like that. Basically, we have ad hoc. If you want to attend a workshop, there's a fee. You want a queen bee, there's a fee. But we're supposed to represent all beekeepers. A lot of them don't have a lot of money. So we try to make an effort to have open enrollment in almost everything. Everything we do, we have a symposium, it's open to all beekeepers, all right, without a fee. We don't have a file cabinet with a bunch of financial records in it, and some of our donors, thankfully they stayed with us, but they were uncomfortable with some of this at first. In this electronic age, we do most by email. We have computers, and we keep it relatively informal. So our association was formed in 1998, and about 10 years ago, we started to get more active. This is you're familiar with a SWOT analysis. It's where you look at the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats of an industry. We had our leadership team get together in 2019. Before that, we did some of this, but it was a little bit more informal. It was more like, what should we do to help beekeepers? But we formalized it. And these blue arrows are what we turned into, basically you'll see they're the number one next, that's our priorities, number one. So you look at weaknesses, we said weak bee genetics, we need to do something about that. In 2016, we started this program that took 6 years, but this just last year, with the help of ACR, we're able to address that. We said we had a lack of training, we had all these failing beekeepers. And so we said we need to address that. We're gonna have a training program. And I'll go into that in more depth. Most of you heard yesterday from Chuck. I'm not going to be repeating what he has. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to set up a program like this that might work for other countries. We have a lack of requeening, and we're still addressing it. It's going to take a lot more work on that, but we have to actually prove. You saw the numbers from Cooper yesterday on how young queens are more productive. They produce more honey. We need to do a little bit more to kind of prove that in Fiji, I think. Weak disease and pest awareness, we've been addressing that with a lot of training in the past year. Opportunities for honey export. We've have some projects addressing it. The value-added products, that was back in 2019. Since that time, with the help of ACR and the U.S. Embassy, we've had a lot of value-added products to address that. Organic and natural, we haven't really done a whole lot on. We've had it on there as a priority, but we haven't done a lot on that. In part because in Fiji, the way the laws are written, there's no financial incentive to calling your organic. Anybody can call their honey organic. There's nothing in our legislation that prohibits anybody from doing it. So it's hard for somebody to say, I'm going to go through all the trouble and not treat my hives for mites, and I'm going to have pure beeswax foundation. I'm going to do all these things if there's no financial incentive on it. Diseases and pests we've been addressing. So the point I wanted to make on this is that our projects that we define come about from a strategic framework. We look at the industry and say what's needed. We think about who's the best person, who's the best organization or entity to address it. Is this something that should be addressed by government? Something that the individual beekeepers just individually should address? Or is it something that the beekeepers collectively can do something? And then from those possible solutions, the ones that we say the association is going to address, we make projects and we assign people to basically lead them. Now, not everybody's in the same. We try to get consensus, but the reality is, as you know, you have differences of opinion. A lot of people just want free stuff, subsidies and so on. But most of the time, what we try to do is, instead of giving out something, we trade it. For instance, if we have a skilled beekeeper, we try to turn them into a mentor to teach an unskilled beekeeper. So we might trade, if we have funding, we might trade some beehives, not cash. We might trade, instead of giving somebody, this experienced beekeeper, some beehives, we trade them beehives. Say, you mentor this person, and you get this beehive. So we trade it. The same thing with our instructors. We don't just, we basically trade. We have donor money. We trade it for that skilled beekeeper to instruct a workshop. So yeah, we design projects and assign people, and then we execute it. And we probably do a reasonable good at this. We're a little bit spotty sometimes on the execution. Every project needs monitoring. Some people are self-starters, others less so, but we need to have projects monitored. But there's a lot of things that don't require any funding, okay? We had some good successes here. We outlawed neonicotine pesticides. We had a neonicotinoid pesticide being sold here. It's very dangerous for bees, and we're able to get that banned in Fiji. It didn't cost us anything. We also had a situation where we had some illegally imported honey that was adulterated, and we pushed for the prosecution of that successfully. So there's some things that don't need funding at all. We also, we try to make it easier for the Fiji government and for donor organizations to deal with beekeepers. Because they can come to our association if they have let's say they want to do agriculture strategy or biosecurity issue. We normally these days have a seat at the table and can represent beekeepers. We have to make sure we're representing the beekeepers, not just their own personal opinions, but we try to represent beekeepers in these meetings. And the same with donor organizations. It's a lot easier for, say, an organization like ACR to deal with Fiji beekeepers than to try to deal individually with beekeepers one-on-one. So we try to make it, those kind of projects don't cost us anything. So these are some of the things we've done, and I'll talk about which ones have worked out really well and which ones are less so. The mentor program, we started out with a mentor program because mentoring is one-on-one, and it's a lot easier to implement than a training program because most beekeepers are comfortable with, they're already getting nagged by a neighbor that wants to get started beekeeping, or they already know these, so we allow the mentors in a lot of cases to choose their own trainee. So it formalizes it. We give them a list of things that they're supposed to teach the trainee over a course of a year, and they mentor it. We started with that one. Later, we introduced the training. We had some instructor development workshops where we kind of agreed on what needs to get taught in an introductory beekeeping class, and we also got a chance to practice teaching so we could see who was really capable of teaching and who needed more help. So we started that training program. I'll go into a little more work on that. Then we added the value-added bee products, which is really a kind of specialized training, but it's also one that we developed, and you'll hear, I think Karen's going to be talking later today or tomorrow on that, so I won't say too much other than it's a kind of an offshoot from the training program that was geared towards increasing women's participation in the industry and also to allow beekeepers to get more profits out of the same number of beehives that they have. Row and mite control. We have an overseas. We've kind of stopped it at COVID, and we need to get it restarted. Overseas internships and work. We sent 5 people to New Zealand. One of our hosts is here today, Alan, to learn beekeeping. Just most of them were for about a month, some 2 months, 3 months, and it was to learn how things were done on a larger scale that they could come back and share with other Fijian beekeepers. And a few of those people who went overseas are in the room, and they've done that. They've shared. It's been great. We also, on the network, one of the great values of an association is communication. And each year we now have a symposium. It's very cheap. We don't do it like this, okay? It's open enrollment. We typically get a school. We're fortunate to have some of our leadership team is our school teachers, and we get schools for free or almost free, and we invite everybody, and we give them lunch, and there's a lot of networking going on at those meetings and other events. And we have a Facebook group now. It's five years old, and has been very useful for networking. People buy and sell things on there and ask questions. I say lobbying, but really it's representing. It's not really lobbying so much. It's more just representing beekeepers with government, with private agencies, and so on. And also donors sometimes come to us. We've had a couple of projects where they want to do beekeeping development in Fiji. Like Barefoot College was one that came to us and said, we want to do beekeeping, and basically they just worked through our organization to implement their project. We helped them with that. We don't engage in a lot of commercial activity, okay? There's things we could do. We could buy things in bulk and make it cheaper for beekeepers to buy, or we could maybe even form a honey, buy honey and have our own label. What we want to do is enable private enterprise in Fiji to be successful. We want beekeepers to take up these things, and we will help them to the best we can. We will not compete against them. One exception is with the barcodes. We've made barcodes available at very low cost so that beekeepers can put this on their labels. It helps them get into a supermarket, because a lot of the supermarkets, they want you to have the barcode so they don't have to put their own sticker on. It looks unprofessional. So we make that available. If a company in Fiji or to a beekeeper or beekeeping supply company were to make that available inexpensively, we would back out of that, doing that ourselves. Okay, so I mentioned about small countries can't expect the government to have an expert in everything. So what we've done in Fiji is we tried to squeeze the brains out of the knowledge out of the most skilled beekeepers that we have in Fiji. And being small, and a small island country has several constraints to development that you guys all know real well. One is the access to knowledge and skills. So we have to utilize what we have available, regardless of whether it's government or private sector, and then the access to equipment in bees, and then the cost. A lot of you guys have seen development projects, right? You have a development project that's foreign, and by the time the airfare and the hotels and the overseas consulting costs are taken out, the amount of money that's actually spent on the ground is small. It mostly goes to airfares, hotels, and overseas consultants. So we tried to change that. We want to be a more effective use of donor money than the alternatives. And utilizing local skills is a way to do that. The next few slides I have are on our training program. I'm going to go fast because I don't want to duplicate what Chuck said yesterday, but just to briefly, so this I'll talk about a training program. First, I want to give a little bit of credit to International Trade Center, who was our first partner and took the risk to fund our mentor program. It's European Union funded, and to their credit, they took the risk and it worked out well. And from that, we got engaged with Pacific Farmer Organizations, PIFON, and ACR for a longer term project. And U.S. Embassy funded a year of our training program, which was great. Okay, so I won't talk too much about this, but basically, we all know that training by actually doing things is good. We try not to have classes with 30 people where people don't even get to touch a hive tool. Our idea is they need to each day spend at least a couple of hours, if they or more, actively doing it. They're going to learn by doing it. So we have typically 12 students or less in a workshop. If they have more than 6 students, there even has to be an assistant instructor. Okay, we qualify and certify our instructors. The venues, we want them to be good, and we enforce some of this, not enforce it, but in all of our workshops, we have a student evaluation at the end. It only has 3 questions on it. How good was, their evaluation of the overall workshop from excellent to poor. And then we ask them what was the most important thing they learned in the workshop. And then we ask them for a suggestion for future workshops. How can we improve the workshop? And this feedback is valuable for our instructors and valuable for our management of the program. So we know if we get a lot of complaints about the venue being too hot or something like this, we can talk to the instructor and try to get, and the instructor on their own will know what needs to get done because their reputation is kind of at stake on that. And we like the students to leave the class with something, a handout. In the case of the value-added classes, the value-added product classes, they actually leave with some of the product, but leave the class with something. And our classes tend to be open enrollment. Probably the biggest complaint we get about our programs is, why wasn't I invited? Why wasn't I included? So we try not to select people and say, okay, we're going to give this person something, some value of some kind, and not some other person. We're trying to have them self-select, and the way we do that is by setting criteria that for this program, it's meant for people with who've been beekeeping at least 2 years, or people who have a certain number of hives plus, either below a certain amount or above a certain amount. But we try to qualify it like that as best we can, and we try to arrange our projects to be open enrollment, so we avoid that. We don't always avoid it, but we try as best we can, because it just kind of it hurts the cohesion or of the beekeepers in Fiji. Okay, so all of our instructors are private contractors. They don't work for Fiji Beekeepers Association. We're trying to build them up. Well, eventually, the goal is that Fiji Beekeepers isn't even needed in this, and that on a commercial basis, these beekeepers can, that training is a part of their business model, and that's already the case with several beekeepers in Fiji. Part-time, obviously, but it's still, they're doing it on a commercial basis, charging for their training. Sometimes it's another organization that's funding it. Sometimes it's actually individuals just paying them themselves. What Fiji Beekeepers has done is we established the workshop quality by defining what the syllabus is, at least on the basic class. We have, if we're going to be funding it, we have a minimum number of hours that have to be spent in the apiary, class size we talked about. And we have development workshops. Basically, this is kind of some people call a train the trainer kind of thing, where we have cards with like 60 different beekeeping topics, all right? And we hand these out, and each instructor goes and teaches it to the other instructors. And then we have a little bit of constructive feedback on what worked or how different instructors accomplish the same thing, to kind of learn from each other. And it's been very, very, very valuable, I think, for that. I know this looks busy, but really, all we do, if we have a budget, we tell the instructors we have a budget available. They tell us, Fiji Beekeepers Association, they say, hey, I want to do a basic workshop 2 weekends from now. And we say, okay, and then we issue them a purchase order. No purchase order, there's no guarantee we're going to pay for it. So this is the way we manage our budget. We issue purchase orders to the email. Okay, it's not a piece of paper. It's basically in the email. I say, this email is a purchase order to buy from you a certain a class, and then they go off and they announce the class on Facebook, and they take care of everything. They deliver the class. And then they send their acquittal documents to Fiji Beekeepers to get paid. Now, what are their acquittal documents? It's really simple. Those student evaluations, we want to see them. We want the class attendance list, and we want some photographs to see what kind of what was going on in the class, and an invoice from that. Basically, just says, okay, here's how many students I had, and it was a 2-day class, and here's how much I should get paid, and we go ahead and we pay it. So it's really pretty simple. No paper is printed. Okay, Chuck talked about the edict concept, which is something we adapt. Basically, we have the instructor do it, and then we have the trainee or the trainees basically do that same thing. We give them the feedback. There's no learning without feedback, and they do it again and again. Okay, so this is an example of that edict. you'll see here one of our instructors, actual explaining in the classroom. And we like to have people do things in the classroom first because bees are scary. If it's a new class, new beekeepers, bees are a little bit scary. So they learn first in the classroom. And then in the apiary, the instructor goes into a hive. And then later, the students are going into the hives and doing things themselves. Okay, so I know this might seem like a lot of detail, but I want to share this. Okay, this is basically how do we know how much to pay an instructor? Because a lot of people think they don't understand how and it's arrived at in a very logical way, and it's a way that I think other organizations can do it. First of all, the conception is we want to pay beekeepers what a school teacher is paid, roughly the same amount. We consider it to be roughly the same skill level as a trained school teacher, and that's about $100 Fijian per day in Fiji. So we pay them that. Number one, the workshop delivery, 100 days. Anybody who's delivered a workshop knows it takes a day of preparation to deliver that workshop. They have to take care of all the student registrations. They're taking care of all the advertising, the promotion on Facebook and whatever, printing of handouts, checking their beehives, making sure everything's okay, and they have to do the cast acquittal. So we pay them another day's pay for that. So that's another $100. The third thing is the venue. Anybody who's rented a hotel room knows how venues are expensive. So we're expecting our instructors to provide a classroom venue and an apiary venue. And we're going to pay them $100 for that venue. So we're up to $300. Then for materials and handouts and so on, it's roughly $100. And then if they have more than 6 students, another $50. So basically, now we vary it. This is like what we transform into a pay. It's actually per student. After they get up to 6, it's like a per student basis. But this is how it was arrived at, and it's worked pretty well for us. Okay, so this year we've added some specialty classes. We started off basically 90% of the demand for classes is basic beekeeping, but we've added some specialty classes. Okay, I want to changing subjects now. About our beekeepers, because it's important to know the beekeepers we're serving. ACR did a survey a couple of years ago, and I don't know how good the survey was, but basically 250 beekeepers were interviewed, and the results I found shocking. Okay, first, 97, that's 40%. Roughly 40% of our beekeepers thought that wax moth was the most dangerous problem that was killing their bees in Fiji. All right? I hear some of you laughing. Right? Okay. And if you look at the first, second, and third together, it's like 3/4 of the beekeepers think the wax moth is killing their bees. This is stunning. This is a result of people getting started with hives without really knowing what's going on. But it's something that, if this data is anywhere near accurate, it says we still have a lot of work to do. A lot of beekeepers, and these are not beekeepers. These are beekeepers that a lot of them have nothing to do with Fiji Beekeepers Association. They're just beekeepers in Fiji. A lot of them in the villages, but still a lot to do. All right. So they also asked about Fiji Beekeepers Association, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And some of these things, they're kind of expected. One of them was that we charge for our services. Nothing is free. As Chuck mentioned yesterday, we charge $10, okay? Historically, the Ministry of Agriculture had not, and a lot of NGOs had charged nothing for their training. They could come, if they were selected, they were able to come, no charge. We charge $10 because we want them to be invested. So I'm not too concerned about that charging for services. I kind of think that's okay. I understand it. The inequitable, there was always going to be people that think that some of these projects are only going to the friends of, people who know the leadership or whatever. This is a troubling thing, but it's a kind of a reality. It's kind of like the closer you are to Nadi, the more access to NGOs you have. That's a reality. If you're out in Taveuni, you don't have as much access to NGOs. And if you, so the more remote you are, the less you are going to, we try the best we can to not have that happen. But the reality is, I know my neighbor beekeeper better than I know the one that's way out in the bush. And so they're going to be more aware of what we have available and what's going on. But it's something that we're conscious of. We try to work against it. Okay. All right, I'm going to speed things up a little bit. So what has really helped us run an association? One of them is the shared vision of helping beekeepers and focusing on that. And those strategy, we try to once a year have a strategy meeting to kind of get everybody aligned on the same page on that. In our projects, we avoid giveaway projects, as I mentioned, and we also avoid competing. And I think this is important to avoid like factions. And then people management skills. We're a volunteer organization, okay? Our leadership team don't get paid. They might get paid for doing something, driving, delivering something specific that's beyond, but they're volunteers. So, but they still have to get paid in non-financial ways. It has to be rewarding, satisfying work for them, or they're not going to do it. So the leaders of an organization have to be conscious of rewarding and giving recognition to those people who are successful in doing their work. Inclusiveness, we have to actually actively work for diversity and fairness. In some cases, like the training program, we'll allocate a certain part of our budget to different regions of the country so that we don't end up with one region having too much. And by diversity, we try to get diversity by geography, by ethnicity, by gender. There's a lot of, you can slice this a lot of different ways. We try the best we can. We're never going to get it right. But if we just let it naturally evolve, it would become very lopsided to some areas getting a lot more than others. So we really try to do that. Delegate and coach projects. In the last few years, a lot of the projects that I used to manage have been delegated over the last couple of years to others. And then we have to monitor the results. Projects you can't just assign somebody and leave them alone. They need to be monitored. And there's going to be roadblocks along the way, and we just have to climb over them. Okay, so development partners. This would include ACR, PIFON, and so on. Encourage good business practices. I can remember we first engaged with PIFON, and man, was it painful. They were requiring us to have financial integrity in our numbers and be able to support with documentation how our money was spent. And it was a painful experience, but we're a better organization as a result of it. And I thank PIFON. I don't know if Kyle's here or somebody from PIFON, but you know, in the end, it helped us. As painful as it was, it really did help us. We need to do more on project reviews so donors are aware of how projects are going. And also reports that, you know, like a business, association is a bit like a business. And they need to kind of do an annual report that says, what have we accomplished? Where are we going? That kind of thing. Results-oriented funding. There's nothing more frustrating than to see bad projects getting money while we're not getting money. And so I think donors can do a better job of evaluating impact and funding the projects that actually have impact. And the third here is hire agriculture and development professionals. A lot of, I know they're sometimes hard to come by, but it really is helpful when we have a partner who has some expertise like Cooper to deal with. It adds a lot to the projects. And then offer training. We're pretty, if we're weak in anything, it's probably administrative, on the administrative side, and we could certainly use some training on that. Okay, so keys to success, impact on the projects. There is nothing more, the success of the projects, having a training program, having our students say they got a lot out of our training, that's our best endorsement. And we have some of the students, they'll post on Facebook, and it thrills me to see that kind of thing, to see that we've had some successes there. Keeping the association leadership focused is good. It has to be a fun and fair, inclusive environment, because that's really what gives people the satisfaction. And the quality of the project designs, which we talked about. Okay, so I'll skip this one. Okay, now I wanted to mention, there's an organization called Apimondia. It is the International Federation of Beekeeping Associations. And they are an organization that kind of allows beekeeping associations to network. And right now, Fiji, Australia, and New Zealand are the only Oceania region members of this. It does cost a couple €100 to join, and then a couple €100 a year to do it. And you might say, well, what do we get out of it? To be honest with you, there's not a lot of concrete, nothing I can point to directly. However, every 2 years they have a Congress, a huge one, between 3,000 and 10,000 beekeepers. Beekeepers and beekeeper suppliers from China and Europe and every place are coming there and selling their stuff. It's also a big marketplace for honey. Buyers and sellers of honey are there. And the bee science community has several days of scientific presentations that are then posted on their website and accessible, but it's a wealth of information. So that's the Congress, and they've probably spent 90 to 95% of their effort in that area, but now they want to move on more to beekeeping development, okay? So the way it's organized by region and also by scientific focus, so they have people in charge of these different aspects of it. But they want to become more active in beekeeping development, and they signed a memorandum of understanding with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. Now, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN is a huge development agency, and they want to engage with Apimondia, which really means they want to engage with beekeeping associations, okay, us, on projects. Now, what can Apimondia bring to the table? It's primarily beekeepers. Beekeeping expertise, but also beneficiaries of projects. So if we know that we have a beekeeping association in a country that can help implement some development projects, that's a real benefit for FAO instead of dealing with just the government or trying to struggle in some other way. So this MOA, I realize it's a small print, but basically what two areas that in particular focus, one is that they've agreed on a framework that says that they want to provide job opportunities through apiculture in developing countries. Job opportunities. That means basically they want to help beekeepers. And secondly, they want to support countries in the implementation of good beekeeping practices, which means basically improving our beekeeping. So, so this is something I'm not really advocating that you go out and join Apimondia specifically, but I want to make you aware that this is coming. And if you have a beekeeping association, these projects are not going to be limited to just those member organizations. It's going to be wherever FAO wants. So so I am pleased to say that I've been nominated by New Zealand, now New Zealand's delegation to Apimondia, to implement or to be the president of the Oceania region. Okay, I'm not elected yet, but they've nominated me to be president of the Oceania region for Apimondia, primarily because of what our team here in Fiji has done. I'm not going to take credit for it, but our team in Fiji has done some good things, and they want to see more of what we've done here spread. So I've been nominated and seconded by Australia. There's an election in September. I don't think there's anybody else running for it, but if so, what I would be focusing on is going from this memorandum of understanding to projects, actually defined projects that for development in the Pacific. So I'll leave it there. I'm over time, I assume. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.